Hello everybody and welcome. It's Oisin here from iReach. I will be your, host and presenter for the next 30 minutes or so. This is the final in our series of three presentations, three briefings, where we looked at demographics and media consumption of Generation X, Y, and Z in our first briefing. The second briefing, we looked at how to take that information and create personas and pen profiles to allow organizations better target different groups, different cohorts, different age sectors. And then today, for the next few minutes, we're going to look at the final in the series, which is how we turn and connect personas to customer journeys. So the idea here is that we have a final connection between those that we really want to target as key customers or buyer types, how we build them, how we connect the business to those personas, how we connect pen profiles or individual buyer cohorts to customer experience to maximize the services and the product engagement. That's where we're looking at those that are in very early stages or moving through their early stages of their careers, maybe looking at their first house, getting married, having children, and so on. And they're a very important target market for many brands. Generation X, which includes people like myself, are into probably the later stages of our lifestyles and have come through a number of recessions and ups and downs in the local economy. And then boomers, those are in their late 50s into 60s, which are, again, an important buyer type in the local marketplace. So what we do when we're looking at demographic profiling is not just look at the basics of age and gender, but also lifestyles, in this case, social activities. We look at hobbies and pastimes. So what we're trying to do is to understand what goes on with our different buyer types, what makes them different, what makes them alike, how we use this information to be more targeted in our advertising, to be more targeted in our brand strategies, to be more targeted in our engagement across different buyer types. And then just to give an example of what we call indexing. So when we look at and compare different buyer types, indexing allows us to show who over-index or who under-indexes to a market average. So if I just look at an example of this slide here, online by a website, 119 for Generation Z shows that this cohort over-indexes by 19% to the average in terms of how much they use online websites for shopping. And then we can see to the far right, boomers at 77, they under-index by 23% against the average of all the adults we've interviewed in this particular process. So it just allows us to very quickly, without understanding the maths behind each individual percentage, how each of these groups differ. And this is important as we bring forward into building our personas, where we actually start profiling how different groups are alike and how they differ to each other. So in second briefing we ran last month, we looked at developing beyond the buyer personas, beyond the buyer demographics into personas. So this allows us to segment our group of adults. In the original project, it was 1,000 adults. It allows us to break those down into smaller groups that we understand and we align with to more actively target our sales and marketing campaigns. So many brands are focused on marketing to as many people as possible, which is expensive, which is obviously often talking to people who are not going to be part of your brand or not going to buy your product. So the idea of building segments is really to understand the bullseye audience of those smaller groups of like-minded targeted cohorts that are bang on the money or right in the bullseye in terms of your brand, your business, in terms of how to engage. So it allows us to build out more targeted brand media marketing strategy, but targeting those that have most impact to the business. So maybe ignoring 30 or 40% of adults in the Irish marketplace because they just are cold to your brand, they're just not going to engage with your brand, and really maximize your marketing spend on the 60% that will have the most impact for your business performance and your financial returns. So personas equally can be integrated back into CRM systems. So to allow the business from top to bottom to talk not just about, females 24 to 36, but to talk about different groupings and to visualize who people are, to visualize what they engage with, their personality profiles, as well as demographics, and really tie that back into the wider system performance, as well as building those customer journey roadmaps or touch points for a more personalized customer experience. So buyer personas, in terms of background, they really allow you to target your ideal customer and really wrap around your behavioral data, your internal customer data or CRM data, as well as independent research data to understand and personalize your marketing strategies to the people that you know you want to talk to, you know matter most to the brand or to the product strategy. What we've looked at over the past 2 briefings is how to build those personas. So who is that ideal customer? What do they look like? What values do they share? As well as looking at detailed qualitative and quantitative data. We also look at observational research. We look at focus groups. So we're trying to not just quantify, but also really get under the covers in terms of who those people are. When we look at the layering, and this is an important part of segmentation. Segmentation is really about layering different views which are important to your business. So each business will have a different type of engagement. It could be a very transactional engagement with a customer or a buyer type. It could be a very emotional engagement. So what we do on behalf of each brand is to understand the key background in terms of data, the key demographic data we need to capture, and then depending on the business itself, lifestyles and activities. So, for example, a project we ran for Royal Caribbean, a big segmentation project here in the UK, we looked at habits, we looked at their holiday profiles, we looked at what they like to do in terms of their spare time and what's interesting to them in terms of building a holiday. So each brand will have different engagement, different triggers they wish to tap into and build their personas around those particular triggers. Why they're important to businesses is to really allow organizations to have a much more targeted content strategy. So make sure that, again, you're not building a website that's going to be useful for every single visitor. It's aligning the website and the design and the content with the key buyer types you want to target. So even if it's a younger age group, obviously the website has to reflect that. And even though you may get visits from older age groups or from visitors outside your buyer target, it's really aligning and being brave to align strategy with a smaller group and a more important group for each individual brand. It's critically important for sales to have a more targeted approach. So it's not branding and selling to everybody. It really is looking at pain points for those different cohorts. It's really targeting sales and marketing strategy, advertising strategy to those smaller cohorts that are going to be most impactful for the brand. And then to align services after sales to make sure that, again, we're providing the right level of service for the right people at the right touch points. So there are many examples of pen profiles. This is one we shared at the last presentation where we looked at some profiling of our own generations in terms of what brings them together, what makes them alike. And there are lots of different examples of how we present a pen profile. In this instance, we're looking at Generation Z, and we're using those index numbers I highlighted earlier on to show how they over-index compared to the average adult or average personality type, as well as where they under-index. So this gives us a feel, if we were trying to engage with Generation Z, how we might engage with them. On the bottom right, you see shopping habits. So again, they're going to be much more aligned with online. What lifestyles they're more engaging with in terms of what they do above the average of all the other adults we've surveyed. And then we look at activities and hobbies. So as a brand, depending on the industry sector you're in, you will know which of these are important to your brand, which you want to bring forward into your sales and marketing strategy. So some other examples, again, what we always try and do is, as well as visualize, a lot of times we give a name to the persona. And what we always recommend to our clients is to really drive these personas through the organization. So when people in marketing or in sales know who Marketing Molly is, as we have in this example, it's a language that everyone understands. So it becomes part of the internal business. It also can become part of the CRM, customer database. So it really allows the organization from top to bottom to start engaging with personas as a visualized group or cohort of target buyers. Other examples, this is one I mentioned already for Royal Caribbean. Why I wanted to use this example is we highlighted as part of a customer survey for them. As well, sorry, I'll take a step back. So we, in terms of the segmentation piece we ran for Royal Caribbean, we did two surveys. One was a survey of their customers, and using our own panels, we also surveyed non-customers. So it allowed us to get a view both of the internal customer base as well as prospects or likely customers. And from this, we identified 4 key cohorts. The 2 cohorts on the right, the active strivers and the active retirees and the wealthy strivers, are those within the brand where they are very dominant. However, what we uncovered was a new cohort, which is a key target market for Royal Caribbean, called discerning young parents, really driving the strategy away from their core strength to really identify, which will give significant revenue growth and significant volume growth in terms of the number of customers. So while their strategy historically was targeting the 2 cohorts to the far right, the new strategy in terms of increased marketing spend was positioning the brand to discerning young parents. So really going after new customers and a new revenue stream, which they hadn't been targeting before, and allow them to really maximize their spend and investment on that new target cohort. Other projects we've run, we see here a pen profile for Sky high value customers. And then we also have one here for a project we did for eBookers, looking at some pen profiles and customer clusters. So there's lots of different ways of presenting the information. There's lots of different ways of building persona. Each will be unique to each brand. So there's no one size fits all, but it's important that the process of persona development is built on the core brand attributes or the product attributes that each organization wish to aim for. So then the final stage of the journey is then how do we connect our business to those different clusters. So again, most customers are becoming more focused on customer experience. However, most organizations look at every customer as being equally the same, or every likely buyer being equally the same. And some won't be. Some will be cold to the brand. Some will never shop in a particular store. Some will never shop from a particular organization. So it's really being brave to understand which customers' experience matter the most, and how do we align our engagement as part of that journey? How do we map that engagement across all the different touch points? So this is really highlighting where customer experience and customer journey mapping really tightly integrated, and not another layer or another different process within the organization. It's an extension, or it's a connection between our buyer personas we've already outlined with how each of those personas engage differently with the brand. Some personas will be very warm to the brand or very, very strong advocates to the brand, some less so. So the relationship and engagement across each of those different touch points and different levels of advocacy need to differ and need to address different pain points or different needs of those individual cohorts. And this is just giving a very simple example of that. Most organizations now are very familiar with Net Promoter Score, or the recommend question in terms of how we engage with an organization. So you'll see from the very far right, the ideal customer for most brands is your brand advocate, those that are really promoting and driving your brand. But then we will always have different relationships across loyal customers, engaged customers, and then to the far left, those disruptive customers who are unlikely to work with the brand, to buy from the brand. Maybe they've had a poor experience, maybe they've had frustration experience. So they will have a different relationship to the brand and different customer journey touch points with the brand as well. So all of these need to be considered to provide a more tailored service and more tailored customer experience to different cohorts or different personas. So this is just an example of where an organization might start. So a lot of organizations actually start customer journey, which makes sense. Around the sales process, so really understanding how people buy. However, we know it's so important when we look at before the purchase, before somebody engages with a brand. We know the importance of social media now. We know the importance of online engagement, the importance of an individual website. So the customer journey includes all areas that engage with each individual touch point. So starting with social media, starting with online search. So all the search activities that may happen before an engagement. Then we look at the during engagement in terms of the shopping experience, the purchase experience. And then as we move along the circle to the left, we see the after experience, the service experience. So when building a customer journey, you can pick before, during, or after, or all of them, or depending on where you believe the main pain points are with your organization, maybe you focus on those. So they can be developed both across different parts of the customer experience, touch points or journey, or they can be fully comprehensive from beginning to very end. So it really depends on where the pain points might be or where the journey mapping needs to start. So what are customer journey maps? So these are, again, very unique to each individual organization, very unique to different parts of the customer experience journey. And the goals really for customer journey mapping is to really understand the issues and opportunities in terms of the customer journey roadmap or the pathway. So are there pain points? Are there gaps? Are there barriers? Are there areas where the customer journey continually fails? Or are there very positive parts of the customer journey that need to be expanded across different touch points within the organization? So it really is used to evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of the current journey, and also to see where the gaps are, where there are areas for improvement, to remove barriers or to remove inhibitors to doing business or to providing an excellent customer experience across the many different touch points. What we have here on the bottom of this slide, and I think it's really important for organizations to consider why they might do persona development, why they might consider segmentation, and why they might finish with the third phase called journey mapping. So Aberdeen research out of the US has shown that there can be a 24% increase in marketing return on investment and a 16% shorter sales cycle using personas and journey mapping. And I think everyone is really trying to squeeze as much value from marketing budgets, and that can be targeted marketing campaigns, promotional activities, pricing activities, or TV and media activities. Again, being able to maximize return on investment. So making sure that the message you want to promote to your target buyers is actually reaching the correct buyer type. It's reaching the buyers that are going to engage with the brand, and it's not falling on deaf ears. And that's one of the challenges that we all know in terms of marketing and advertising, in terms of people not getting the right message, or the right people not getting the right message based on your brand and campaign activities. So journey mapping and persona development allows you to be much more targeted in how you engage with that. Adobe research shows when some benchmarking exercises or benchmark research that those organizations using personas and mapping way outperform those that don't. So it's a clear message to say it's something that can be quantified in terms of return on investment. It's something that can be benchmarked, which clearly shows that those who engage with journey mapping do achieve better performance because they're talking to and engaging with a much stronger, a much more bullseye target market than a more generic campaign, which is talking to everybody, which also includes those people that will just not engage or just with your brand or buy your product. So how can current journey mapping be used? So we need to learn how to understand the current journey. So those different pain points or touch points that buyers engage with. Again, it can be physical, so it could be in a retail store, it can be online, and it can be logical, it could be emotional. So it allows you to really understand both how buyers can engage with the brand, but also the type of relationship you're trying to build with those buyers. We can also use it to design new experiences or to improve service experiences, as well as roll out new customer workflows. But I think for me, the most important part and one of the biggest challenges for organizations is that more personalized communications of getting a personalized message to those buyer types that matter most. And I think the biggest challenge in terms of areas like marketing automation and even AI and marketing is to really understand and have that almost individual message for each individual customer that engages with your brand. So the steps to mapping a customer journey: internal insights, so really understanding what's going on across the different touch points, be it pre-sales, be it in the sales environment, be it in the service environment. Understand how we want to develop the relationship. Is it functional? Is it transactional? Is it emotional? Is it a combination of those? And then the areas we've looked at over the last two briefings are the customer research, as well as external research of non-customers or different buyer types, and really building those personas. If we look at analyzed customer research, really building those personas and those target customers through segmentation. And then the last stage, which we're covering in this briefing, is the visualizing the journey, is mapping that journey and being able to then understand the different touch points across the different types of personas or different types of buyers. It's a very unique process for each individual organization. It's very unique for each brand because every customer experience across every brand will differ. And the idea is to really detail and understand the different touch points, what the service offer, the product offer is, what the customers are looking for at each individual touch point, and really visualizing that and extending that to connect different parts of the customer experience journey or customer experience touch points. There are many different ways of presenting or visualizing this information. What we have here are 3 different stages and different touch points or buyer stages. And these can be aligned with each individual cohort. So it could be a Generation Z engagement for one touch point, Generation Y engagement for a different touch point. And again, each area is then developed to include, be it technology, could be a retail outlet. So it can include many different areas or key touch points and really understand the pain points, what works well for different buyer types, and maybe what needs to be improved for different buyer types. So again, each representation will be unique to each organization, and it does take time to really break down the different touch points and create the journey itself, and then understand how we engage with different buyer types as part of that journey. A key part of the process is to really, I suppose, take that honest and objective view in terms of touch points that work and touch points that have a risk of inhibiting the engagement, or different weaker touch points. That could be, challenges with the website. It could be not a non-availability of mobile apps. It could be a physical issue in terms of stock in a store. So the idea here is that we can actually start looking at those areas that have the most negative impact on the customer journey, as well as those that might have the most positive impact. So it allows organizations to really identify the risks, the pain points, where to focus in terms of driving positivity. So it could be post-sale satisfaction is really high, or a net promoter score is really high as part of post-service experience. So that could really drive some campaigns in terms of marketing activities, or if there's an issue with availability of stock across the website, for example, well, then that's something that, again, the organization can focus on to try and minimize those pain points or remove those barriers as part of the journey. So it's a great way of understanding the risk of the relationship, the risk of customer experience, and where those relationships may falter. This is another way to identify the journey, but this is looking at different channels. So looking at different channels and different technologies used. So the thing with journey mapping is that there's lots of different ways of representing the map. And again, it will be unique to each organization depending on the products, depending on the range of channels, be it telephone, online, face-to-face, going into a branch if it was a financial service organization. And again, looking at the different ways of engaging across the journey. And then when organizations get good at this, then it's actually understanding how we talk to Generation Z, for example, across these different technologies, be it mobile phone or a laptop, as well as understanding how we might talk to boomers as a key target audience, and maybe they're much more about kiosks or staff interaction or telephone or whatever. So it's really getting under the covers to understand how your business engages. And you can even start looking at the relationship across the day. So how will a particular customer engage with your services or your technology across the range of day, from being in the office to being at home to being in the car commuting or whatever. So there's no real limit to how you might represent or how you might connect the dots in terms of different channels, the different touch points, and each one will be unique and will be important to other sites, will be unique and different to each individual brand. Again, some brands really focus heavily on building an emotional engagement with buyer types. And again, this is just giving an example of really taking a very emotional view on how we want to connect in terms of how people think and feel, what they see, what they say and do. So again, every organization might have a slightly different style, and where we help in iReach is really understanding that and bringing a moderated experience to really drive out different journey types that are most impactful for different organizations. This is another example where this is looking at a particular buyer type. So this is a persona. We normally give personas a name to help people visualize. And what we can see here is we can see connection across the bottom of the screen, which is in terms of their experience ratings. And then at the top half of the page, we can see different types of touch points, be it action-orientated, emotional connections in terms of what they think, what they feel. So there's no limit to how, depending on your brand, how we connect both functional touch points as well as emotional touch points to really deepen the relationship between a buyer type and the organization itself. And then across the top, you'll see different touch points in terms of risks, in terms of strengths and weaknesses, and where the organization needs to engage down the bottom in terms of those areas that have the most negative impact on experience or satisfaction. Another example here is really connecting another persona type to a purchase experience, looking at a broadband journey. And again, we have different touch points, we have different logical and emotional connections across the different touch points. And again, organizations can map these to really identify how to better engage at an emotional or functional level, as well as a service level, both pre and post service engagement. And then this final one is looking at a technology engagement. So this is for social media, and this is a gamer example of a technology journey roadmap, and this is looking at lots of different technology types and how different media devices are used to engage with, in this instance, a social or an online gamer. So as you can see here, each of the journeys will differ based on the product, will differ based on the brand, will differ based on the different categories that each organization works in. So just to summarize, so customer journey maps will and allows organizations to really start connecting at a personal or persona level. It can include emotional and logical or rational connections. It's a way to visually outline the user's process, as well as looking at gaps or risks within the relationship. And then we can look at multiple components that impact on the customer experience, and they will be unique to each individual organization. And then really by layering and understanding the personas, it allows organizations to absolutely pinpoint who the target market is, who they want to really engage with, and at what level and what way across the customer journey will that work. So what we see is return on investment figures, as I mentioned, from Aberdeen Research, Adobe, which really highlights how this really strong return on investment with more targeted marketing and advertising spend by engaging with a target-rich or a bullseye audience over and above trying to market and sell to everybody. So hopefully we just bang on the money in terms of timings, 30 minutes. So hopefully this gives a quick summary of the importance of layering and building personas from understanding your demographic profiles, layering over that emotional lifestyle, as well as hobbies and other key aspects that are important to each individual brand. And then once you understand who your key target market is, it's really building the business and the services and the processes that most and have a most positive impact on customer experience for those individual persona groups. So it's really, really getting closer to the customer, getting to understand the customer much more effectively, and aligning marketing activities and marketing spend with those. So it's a really, really strong way of understanding and connecting with personas, as well as driving a much improved and more targeted customer experience. So that is the last of my slides. We will have this up on our YouTube channel in a day or two. I have a couple of minutes if we have any questions. So again, if you want to have a type of anything on the box, please do so now. We do have one question on targeting buyers, non-customers. So a recent big segmentation project we ran for Arnott's department store. So we surveyed their customers through their CRM system, and we also used our panel. We have a consumer panel of about 40,000 adults in the Irish marketplace. So we used our own panel to talk to non-shoppers of Arnott's, I guess, is a fair way to describe it. So what it allowed us to do is to both talk to customers, talk to non-customers, to really build a very comprehensive picture of who and why different shopper types shop in Arnott's, and why some might be loyal or strong advocates to the brand. And then we also profile those who don't, and we try to understand why they don't and how they may differ from from existing customers. So it's really trying to learn from existing customer personas and really try and map that out to non-customers to really see at a personality level and as a persona level those who don't shop and why. So it allowed us to, I guess, look internally and externally at the process. Another question then on the number of cohorts or clusters. What's the optimum number? So the couple of projects, the one I mentioned for Royal Caribbean, we initially uncovered about 6 different clusters, and we brought it down to 3 that were the really target-rich clusters for the brand to focus on. And then when we were workshopping the initial range of findings for the different personas, we agreed to split those 3 out into 4. One group were quite similar, but they had different age profiles. That's, if you remember, we had the active retirees and the wealthy strivers were quite similar in terms of profile and persona, but the age difference was, and their kind of retirement status were 2 big differences across both, and that was one that we split into 2. So there's no real optimum. What we'd always say is that it needs to be managed. So, for most marketing organizations, 3 or 4 personas is probably the optimum that you could actively have different campaigns, have different, more personalized services, have different channels of communication. And beyond that, it probably gets too granular, and the percentages in terms of the number of potential customers probably gets too small. So probably 3 or 4 target customers in terms of those bullseye personas is probably the optimum for most organizations. And invariably they're based on a range of different, be it personality attributes, transactional attributes in terms of how they transact with a particular brand, or it could be other things like life stages in terms of children and non-children. So there's no one size fits all. It's starts with a very scientific approach in terms of building out the clusters, the maths in terms of how many clusters there are, and then we workshop that back with brands to really align with those that fit the brand strategy, fit the marketing strategy, and then really start developing those personas to tie back into the customer journey. So I think that's it. So again, thank you for your time. Apologies, I might be a little noisy here in the background, but hopefully you picked it up okay. And again, if you have any questions, please come back to Ryan. I think most of you should have his email ID. The recording will be available in a couple of days, as I said, on our YouTube channel. And hopefully you found this briefing of interest and informative. And again, thank you for your time.